Hello, my fellow readers. My name is Greg, and this is Ghost Readers in the Sky, where I start with the history and literature of the American West and then gallop off into whatever direction I feel like. Today, I want to do a wrap-up of the Spring into Adventure event. I read a lot of adventure in April and May. I don't know that I followed all of the prompts and suggestions, but that's got nothing to do with nothing, because I read some great books, a baker's dozen, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to tell you about them. I read two nonfiction works. I read The Oregon Trail by Francis Parkman. I did that as a buddy read with Gavin over at Genre Books, and I'll be talking about that later in a separate video. I also read Biography of Jim Bridger by Jerry Ensler, and I've talked about that in a couple of videos in the past. That was really good if you're interested in the life of the mountain men of the early fur trappers. This biography of Jim Bridger is definitely worth it. Then I read 11 works of fiction, and I'm going to go backward from all of these were great, but I'm going to start at the ones that I enjoyed least up to my favorite that I read over the Spring into Adventure event. So at number 11, we have Jules Verne with The Master of the World, a book that he wrote in 1904, which was right, I believe he passed away in 1905. So this was right at the end of his life, after he had written, the big books, the Around the World in 80 Days and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and all of those things that he's really well known for. This is a book about some weird things that are happening in the U.S., in the Appalachian Mountains, and some strange sightings there, some strange vehicles showing up on the roads and in the water. And we have our hero Strock, who works for something that's kind of like the FBI maybe, or maybe more closely the Pinkertons or some agency like that. But it looks like it's a government agency who's sent out to find out what's going on. I like this book. The ending was a bit contrived, but I think that was part of Verne's point. And I think that as he was trying to make his case that technology isn't always as good as it sounds like it might be, sometimes bad things happen. Anyway, there it is. Jules Verne, Master of the World, 1904. Number 10, another one that I talked about before, and this was a reread for me. This is Arthur Conan Doyle's Study in Scarlet from 1887. The first Sherlock Holmes novel. Really quite good, with the first half taking place in London with Holmes and Watson. This is the story where Holmes and Watson are first introduced and become flatmates. And then the second half of the book goes back in time and goes to the American West in the Utah Territory, and it all comes together quite nicely. And again, I've talked about this in a previous video, but this is a really enjoyable novel. I think all of the Sherlock Holmes novels are fun to read and always give you something to think about. So that was good. That was number 10. Number 9, Max Brand and the Untamed from 1919. This is the first book with Whistle and Dan. I think there were 4 of these in that series. Whistle and Dan is a fascinating character. He also is perhaps a bit overpowered. He has a horse named Satan and a wolf dog named Black Bart. The first of 3 people with pet wolves that I'm going to talk about in this video. And he just has uh, an amazing power to him, and even though he gets beaten down a little bit, you know he's going to come back. It was really well written. It was well plotted. Whistling Dan is a fun character. He just to me was just a touch. You knew he couldn't lose, even when it looked like he was losing. Couldn't really lose. That's the only fault I'll give it. That was number 9. Max Brand, The Untamed, 1919. Number 8, J.M. Barrie. You know what I'm going to say, right? Yep, Peter Pan, 1904. Again, the second book with A Wolf as a Pet. Wendy, when she goes to Neverland, before she goes to Neverland with Peter Pan, she's been dreaming of having a pet wolf, and when she gets to Neverland, a wolf finds her and becomes her pet. You've probably all read this or seen the play or seen the Disney adaptation or seen the plethora of movies that have been made about this character, but the book is just so well done. There certainly is language that you would expect from the early 20th century, particularly when it comes to the, I'll say Indians, who are part of one of the bands in Neverland, along with the pirates and the wolves and the bears and the lost boys. They are, some of the words, I don't know that they're so much offensive, it's not what we would say today. And other than that, the rest seems pretty excusable for the time. Plus it has fairies. And if you haven't read the book, you may be surprised by the ending. So it's worth reading just to see how J.M. Barrie wrapped up this story and how it finished between Wendy and Peter Pan. A really satisfying ending. So that was number 8, Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, 1904. Number 7, Jack London, White Fang, 1906. The third book with a wolf as a pet, or at least claimed by a human. White Fang is a book about a wolf who is slowly introduced to human society in a lot of different ways. It's a brutal book. There's a lot of fighting between the wolves, between the wolves and the domesticated dogs. Some attacks on humans and by humans. The violence is toned down a little bit from some other works by Jack London, but man, White Fang is just such an interesting character, and seeing how he thinks about, particularly the humans he's around, is fascinating. I really like the thoughts that London has put into White Fang's head, and it's worth reading, and it has a really happy ending, almost too sentimental, but I liked it anyway, even if a little tear rolled down right here at the end. He got me. Number 6, Patricia Highsmith, Strangers on a Train, from 1950. I was thinking I'd read this book before, but I think I've just seen the film that Alfred Hitchcock did, which has a lot of similarities, certainly is based on Patricia Highsmith's novel, but man, the novel is so good. And it's different. The plot is some different, but the basic premise is the same. 2 strangers meet on a train. One is complaining about his wife, the other is complaining about his father, and a decision is made for them each to murder the other person's problem person in their lives. And it really unravels from there. And you see some of that unraveling in the Hitchcock film, but I think that following Guy, especially as we move through this book, just is, you see him descending, you see him getting worse and worse, you see him crumbling, but you can't turn away. It's a great book. That was number 6, Patricia Highsmith, Strangers on a Train. Number 5, Dashiell Hammett, Red Harvest from 1929. This is the first novel about the Continental Op, who is featured in lots and lots of short stories by Dashiell Hammett, and also in a few novels. But this was the first novel. He'd appeared in short stories before. He's an operative for the Continental Detective Agency, which is kind of modeled on the Pinkertons. He's sent to a town in Montana that's kind of based on Butte, but it's called, well, the official name is Personville. But the first person that the Continental Op talks to about the town has a bit of an accent, and he calls it Poisonville. And so the op starts calling it Poisonville, which is apropos. And he meets all of the people who are causing problems. It starts with a mining strike that they bring in a bunch of thugs to stop the strikers, and then the thugs just stay in town, and it just gets more and more violent. This is an extraordinarily violent book. With the death count is high, but it's not graphic. There's a lot of violence, but it's just like this guy shoots this other guy, or this guy's found dead. Some really impressive characters, a couple of really strong female characters included, and just really well done. I am a big fan of Dashiell Hammett. I'm a big fan of the Continental Op and Red Harvest. That was number 5, and number 4 is also Dashiell Hammett, The Maltese Falcon. This is Sam Spade. It's the only novel that Sam Spade appears in, even though Dashiell Hammett wrote a number of short stories about Sam Spade. And again, you've probably seen the film directed by John Huston, right? With Humphrey Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet, and just an incredible cast, an incredible film, really, really well done. One of my very favorite films of ever. But the book is so good, and watching Sam Spade navigate some of the relationships he has with the people he works with the women he knows, it just adds an extra layer of complexity that I really liked, as well as the mystery of what is this Maltese Falcon? Why is everybody looking for it? Why is everybody dying trying to get it? It's a great book. That was number 4. Number 3, Robert Louis Stevenson, Kidnapped, 1886. I've talked about this in a previous video, but this is Robert Louis Stevenson's historical fiction. So he was writing this in 1886, writing it about a time a few years after the Battle of Culloden, where the Scots were defeated by the English in horrible ways, and the wearing of tartan was banned, and the traditional Scottish weapons were banned, and people were starting to be transported to Canada and what would become the United States. And so it is historical fiction because it's set post-Culloden, so we're looking at 1751 or so, book written in 1886. David Balfour is a great character, and this is just a fantastic book. I talked about it in another video, but if you have not read Kidnapped, you should. And if it's been a long time since you read Kidnapped, you should read it again. That was number 3. Number 2, Zane Grey, Riders of the Purple Sage. Again, I've talked about this one in a previous video. This is probably Zane Grey's best known work, and it is just an incredible story about an independent woman who is Mormon, but who is fighting against marrying another Mormon and being one of many wives. And she has a huge ranch that she inherited from her father, lots of cattle, lots of horses, and trying to work with the various cowboys and others who are helping her take care of her ranch, while the Mormons in town are trying to stop all of this from happening and get her to marry one of them. And you get Lassiter as kind of the hero coming in, who has an agenda of his own, as he's looking for someone who was, he believes was, I'll say, kidnapped by the Mormons. And that brings us to number 1, Jack London, The Call of the Wild, 1903. Again, another one that I've talked about before, but what a fantastic book. Call of the Wild, Buck is a dog who is living a pretty cushy life. He gets kidnapped and sold and taken to the Yukon, and is turned into a sled dog. There's some brutal fighting in this book. The dog fights are graphic and a bit disturbing, and yet just so engrossing. They just pulled me in so well. And watching Buck, this is, in many ways, this is the opposite of White Fang. White Fang starts off completely wild and completely free, and he gives up some of that freedom to become part of a human community, and becomes part of more and more loving communities as the book goes on. Call of the Wild, Buck starts with in a very loving family, and becomes more and more wild as the book progresses. So it's an interesting contrast between the two books, which certainly set in the same place, the same time, and adventures written from a dog's point of view, but just great books. That was my favorite book that I read for Spring Into Adventure. So there we go, the Baker's Dozen books that I read during the Spring Into Adventure event. I think all of these books are worth reading. There's a playlist of Spring Into Adventure that you can look at if you want to see some of the other things that I've talked about in the past. This was a great event. April and May, Spring Into Adventure. I had a lot of fun in this one. And that's all for today. Thanks for joining me. And until next time, my name is Greg. This is Ghost Readers in the Sky. Keep on reading. And it's great if you keep your reading adventurous.